Hi, so we saw earlier the numbers, and it says American students study more than Japanese, and I bet you're all wondering, why do Americans study so much? Why? We are conditioned to believe at a very young age that we can be anything, that we can do anything, and succeed at anything that we want to achieve if we work hard. Now, as a high school student, what does working hard mean? You know, our only role is to go to school. Working hard for us means studying, because by studying and by achieving high grades, we know that that's how we're going to get into a school that is right for us. And that school that we attend, the university, is going to lead us to the success that we're looking for. So how do we prepare for that? In high school students, we start learning the lecture process, and we take notes, and we read, and we go to the library. But it's not just, you know, what people generally think studying means staying in your book and reading and it's boring and you fall asleep. No, we start developing different ideas and different ways of studying, and sometimes that means questioning what the professor's saying. Sometimes that means questioning what the books are saying. And so we study that, we read it, and we analyze, and we ask each other, and we get into groups and discuss that. How does that affect me? This is so boring. What does this mean? Why am I learning this? And we ask each other this, and that's how some of us study. Now, there are others that do read a book, and they read for hours, and they go into the library, and they read, and they understand it, and that's how they achieve, that's how they achieve success. But we know that that's not everybody. And so we test ourselves constantly, and we find new ways of studying, of achieving and understanding, and not just understanding, why does 2 plus 2 equal 4? There's, well, because you put two things and then it's 4. There's so many answers. There's just not one answer, and there's different ways of looking at things. And so that's how we're conditioned to learn, to look at different possibilities. Now, we continue studying in high school, but then we study the ways in which we're going to study in the higher ed. And what I mean higher ed is university, right? We study in ways that we want to study further. And what I mean is we study our preference. So we look at, maybe I like to study in a small group setting, and some students want to study in a large classroom setting like this. And I heard earlier someone mentioning, well, in this setting with a lot of students, it's hard to learn. But sometimes you can question the university and say, well, you should make it easy for us to learn. You should make it easier for us to study. But this is where students have the power in the U.S. to learn at their own pace. Find ways to make themselves learn easier. So if you have a classroom this big and you think, I don't understand the professor, what students in the U.S. do, they get together and they build study groups. The libraries in the U.S. a lot of times are open 24 hours a day, and you will find students at all hours, either studying alone or studying together or finding new ways of studying. The point is that we're constantly looking at ways to do things differently, constantly working hard at standing out, at achieving that, whether it's personal success or because we're of a very competitive nature, at beating and achieving greater success than the person next to the left and to the right. So our choices of study in the U.S. vary for different levels. You have liberal arts, you have community colleges, big schools, small schools. We're constantly looking and working hard at how we're going to figure out how we're going to fit into that. And then when we get to college, we study even harder because grades are so important. Grades are important in our society because that is how we're judged. As a college student, we're judged by our grades when we look for an internship, when we look for a job, because we have no work history. So our work history is the work that we put in, not just in the library, but in exploring those different ideologies, those different ways of thinking, and exploring what we learn from each other, from professors, from our neighbors. So think about how that applies to you now. You can see, well, this is what Americans do. How does that affect me in Japan? We have this whole completely different system, but nevertheless, you have that power. don't wait for the school to change. Don't wait for your classmates to change. You have that power within yourselves. American students are, like I said, they're constantly looking to achieve, to get to the mountain that we were talking about earlier, and they're always finding a different way to get to that mountain. And by doing that, you have to study. And even after graduation, we continue to study. For example, in the private sector, in business, we're studying different markets. How are we going to sell this apple to this group, to that group, to this group? You don't stop studying ever. It's just a part of life. So the sooner you embrace it, the better you get at it. And that's how we're conditioned in the U.S. to keep doing that. Also, we study, for example, if you've heard of brainstorming, we call it brainstorming. Brainstorming is how we study, is our study groups as adults, whether we're thinking how we're going to market the iPhone here in Tokyo. There was a study group for that. People got together and studied and said, how are we going to sell iPhones to those students at Chiba University? Well, we're going to put this app and this app. That's studying. So we're conditioned to do our homework from a very young age. In the brief time that I have, my challenge to you is to do a self-study. Where do you want to be 5 years from now, 10 years, 15? What's it going to take? It's probably going to take having to sit in that class that you think is boring, right? You have to do it anyway. But how are you going to do that? How are you going to be successful in that class? Look at your neighbors and challenge each other. Be that leader. You are currently the best product of this institution. You're the best product of Japan. You and the rest of society, your parents, your grandparents, the children you don't have yet. You're the best product, and how are you going to improve that product? You're no longer just competing against other Japanese, but you're competing, and not just against Americans, but you're competing against the world. How do you make yourself the best product that not just Japan has to offer to Japan, but to the world? So think about that. Think about what it's going to take for you to be your best product. How will you market yourself to be that spectacular product that Japan has to offer? And lastly, I want to invite you, once you think about, for those of you that are thinking about, well, in order for you start studying, what's it going to take for you to achieve success? Some of you may think that, I think I like that American model of studying, of, studying in groups or sitting at a cafe or studying at the zoo. Not all studying takes place in the classroom. It doesn't always take place in the library, but in various ways. And how are American students doing it? I only have a little bit of time, so I can't tell you, but I invite you to visit the Education USA centers and learn about how other Japanese students went to the US and they used that model of studying, how they achieved success, how they came back to Japan to be the best product that they can be. Not just for Japan, but for the world. Steve Jobs, I'm sorry, was one of our best products. But not just ours, we shared it. We share it with you. When he passed away, those of you saw on Facebook, all those pictures in Hong Kong, in Ginza, in London, of people with their iPhone. He is the best product. He was the best product of the world. You can be that too. But you have to study. And study doesn't always mean just looking at the book, but asking those questions, talking to your fellow students, talking to your parents. They know a lot more than you think. It doesn't seem like they do, but, oftentimes we think, you don't know anything, Mom, you don't know anything, Dad. But they do. It's how you ask the question, right? So ask each other those questions. Ask yourself that question. How will you be the best product right now? Thank you.
はい、皆さん大体お分かりになったと思いますけど、また念のために1年生もいますので、とても簡単に全部訳していると時間がかかりすぎますので、一番最初におっしゃったのは、先ほどからたびたび宮崎先生もおっしゃっていた、あるいは文科省のフィルムにも出てきた そのアメリカの学生の方が日本の学生より勉強するという統計的数字も出てきましたということなんですが、どうしてなんでしょうかということに関するお答えというものを最初おっしゃいました。それはアメリカではもう小さい時からとにかく何をするんでも成功しなくてはいけない、そういうふうに教育されて、そういうふうに考えるように育てられてきている。で成功するためには一生懸命勉強しなくちゃいけない。でとにかく高校の時一生懸命勉強して良い成績を取れば、いい大学に行けて、それが成功につながると。でその勉強の仕方というものを、高校の時から講義を聞く、そしてノートを取る、必要な本を読む、図書館に行って勉強するというような基本的なことは高校の時から身につけます。それで大学に行った時はそれをさらに超えて、もうただ受け身で教育を受けるだけではなくて、先生の言ったことも果たしてどうなんだろうかあるいは教科書に書いてある、本に書いてあることもどうなんだろうか、そういうことを問うような姿勢というのも身につけていきます。それから勉強というのも必ずしも教室でやるだけではなくて、また勉強のスタイルも人様々、一人でコツコツ勉強するのが性に合っている人もいるでしょうし、友達とグループで勉強するのが性に合っている人もいるでしょう。で文科省のフィルムの中に教室、こういう例えば大教室の講義で面白くない、あるいは分からないというようなことを言った人がいましたけれども、例えばそういう場合もアメリカの学生だったら、こういう全体的な講義で実は何がよく分からなかったって言った場合、それじゃあ同じ講義を聞いていた人とグループを作って小グループで勉強してお互いに助け合って分かるようにしようと、そういうような方策を立てる。何かもしつまらなかったんなら、なんであれはつまらなかったんだろうかっていうようなことを例えば考える。そういうところからどこからでも始められることなので、というようなことをどんな問題にもそういうふうに取り組んでいく。例えばつまらなかったとしてもね、なぜつまらなかったのか、とにかくいろいろな問題にはいろんな見方があるし、答えも一つではないので、いろんなことを考えるという癖をつけていくということが一つで、アメリカの大学はほとんど図書館は24時間空いています。それで一人一人勉強するような場ももちろんあるし、グループで勉強する人のためのような設備もあります。そういうふうなところで、とにかく非常にやっぱり競争社会なので、アメリカはみんなが少しでも人より自分が成功するにはどうしたらいいんだろうか、この教室の中で自分ができる人になるにはどうしたらいいのかっていうようなことをいつも考えていると思います。それで成績はなぜ大事かっていうと、やっぱり大学生は成績によって判断されるから、どういうところにインターンシップに行けるか、あるいは就職できるか、それは成績にかかってきますので、やはりそれはいわゆる講義から学ぶだけじゃなくて、学生同士お互いからも学べます。で一番いいことをおっしゃったと思ったのは、学生の皆さんはだから、例えばもう自分から行動を起こしてください。で学校が変わるのを待つとか、そういう受け身の姿勢ではなくて、自分からっていうのは、学ぶっていうのは学校でここで終わってしまうプロセスではなくて、これから生涯続いていく。大学卒業したら学びが終わるわけではないので、生涯続くものだからということですね。それでもちろん就職してもいろいろな課題があるたんびに、それはまた新しくその状態を勉強して、マーケティングにしてもいろいろな方法で、ブレインストーミングをするとか、そういう方法で学んで、いちいち出された課題、宿題をこなして、やっていかなくてはいけないということなので、ローズィーさんは最後に2つ皆さんにちょっと課題を出します。1つのチャレンジ、最初のチャレンジは、皆さんがこれからあと5年後、10年後、15年後、自分はどういうふうになっていたいのかということを考えてください。でそのために今この教室にいて、ここで自分は何をしたらその5年後、10年後、15年後の自分に なれるんだろうかというふうに今の大学にいるというものをそういうふうにアプローチしてください。で皆さんが今この大学のそして日本の誇れる生産物だというふうにおっしゃっていました。だけどそれだけには満足しないで、これから日本は日本の中だけで競争していくのじゃなくて、アジアの中だけでもなくて世界で通用する人間に皆さんはならなくちゃいけないので、そのためにどうやって自分を世界に通用する人間にしていったらいいか、そのことをぜひ考えていってください。もし私が今日お話したアメリカでの勉強の仕方ということに皆さんが興味を持たれて、アメリカで勉強したいと思う方があったらこれから後で、チラシもついてると思うんですが、アメリカ留学フェアというものがありますので、ぜひそこにを覗いてみてください。それでアメリカに来て勉強なさる方がたくさんいることを期待しています。それともちろん最後にもう一つお互いにもいろいろ話し合うということがとても大事です。友達とも先生とも、それとびっくりするかもしれないけど皆さんのご両親とも、親なんか何も知らないと思ってるかも皆さん知りませんが、実は皆さんが思っているよりずっと皆さんのご両親はよく何でも知っている人なので、ぜひそういうリソースを無駄にしないように使ってくださいというのがメッセージでした。はい、失礼します。